The moving truck pulled away from my old apartment building in Phoenix, and I stood there with 3 suitcases, a duffel bag, and absolutely no idea what I was doing. 28 years old, and here I was, Isabella Rodriguez, running towards something I couldn't name in a city that felt like another planet. Miami stretched out before me, all palm trees and humidity and endless possibility, but all I felt was the weight of starting completely over. You know that feeling when you're standing at the edge of a cliff, and you can either jump or turn around and pretend you were never there? That's exactly where I was. 6 months earlier, my world had imploded. The marketing job I'd poured my soul into for 4 years, gone, thanks to company restructuring. The relationship I thought was heading toward marriage, over after I discovered he'd been cheating for months. Even my apartment lease was up, like the universe was giving me one giant cosmic shove toward the exit door. But here's what's interesting about rock bottom. Sometimes it's exactly the solid foundation you need to build something completely new. The Uber driver who picked me up was chatty, asking what brought me to Miami. Starting fresh, I told him, which was the simplest way to explain that my entire life had basically exploded, and I was hoping warm weather and ocean air might help me figure out who I was supposed to be next. He nodded like he understood completely. "This city's good for that," he said. "Miami doesn't judge your past, only cares about what you're building now." I didn't know it yet, but he was absolutely right. My new apartment was in Coral Gables, a tiny studio that cost more than my spacious 1-bedroom back in Phoenix, but it was mine. The previous tenant had left behind a small mirror with a crack running down the middle, and as I stared at my reflection, tired eyes, messy hair, wearing the same clothes I'd traveled in, I realized I was looking at someone I barely recognized. That first week was brutal. I'd wake up disoriented, forgetting where I was until the unfamiliar sounds of traffic and Spanish conversations drifted through my thin walls. I had enough savings to last maybe 3 months if I was careful, but no job prospects, no friends, no routine. Just me and this strange, vibrant city that seemed to pulse with an energy I couldn't quite tap into. The loneliness hit hardest in the evenings. I'd walk down Miracle Mile, watching groups of friends laughing over dinner, couples holding hands, families with children who looked completely at home in this place. I felt like I was watching life through glass, close enough to see it, too far away to touch it. But something was shifting, even in those first difficult days. Maybe it was the way the light fell differently here, golden and warm even late in the afternoon. Or the sound of the ocean, which I could hear if I walked just 10 minutes east from my apartment. There was something about this place that made me feel like I could breathe deeper, think bigger. I started walking every morning, no destination in mind, just moving. Miami revealed itself in layers. The Art Deco buildings of South Beach, the murals in Wynwood, the quiet elegance of Coconut Grove. I'd grown up visiting my abuela in San Antonio every summer, so Spanish flowing around me felt like coming home. But everything else was new. The architecture, the mix of cultures, the way people dressed and moved and talked. It was like stepping into a completely different version of America. 3 weeks in, I was walking back from a job interview that had gone nowhere. Another "we'll be in touch" that meant thanks but no thanks, when I saw it. A billboard on Biscayne Boulevard, bright yellow letters against a sunset background. "You create your own story." I stopped dead in the middle of the sidewalk. People walked around me, probably thinking I was another tourist having a moment, but I couldn't move. Those 5 words hit me like electricity. You create your own story. My whole life, I'd felt like things just happened to me. Jobs I fell into rather than chose. A relationship I stayed in because it was comfortable, not because it was right. Even moving to Miami, I'd been running from something rather than running toward anything specific. But standing there, staring at that billboard, something clicked. What if this wasn't about what had happened to me? What if this was about what I was going to make happen next? That night, I sat on my tiny balcony with a notebook I'd bought at CVS and started writing. Not journaling about my feelings, I'd done enough of that, but actually writing down what I wanted. Not just a job or to be happy, but specific, detailed pictures of the life I wanted to create. I wanted work that felt meaningful, where I could use my creativity and connect with people. I wanted friends who challenged me and supported me. I wanted to wake up excited about my day instead of dreading it. I wanted to feel at home in my own skin, in my own life. Writing it down felt different than just thinking about it. More real, somehow. More possible. The next morning, instead of my usual aimless walk, I headed to a coffee shop in Wynwood I'd been curious about. The walls were covered in local artwork, and the barista, a woman about my age with intricate braids and the most genuine smile, asked if I was new to the neighborhood. New to the city, actually, I said, still figuring it out. Miami can be overwhelming at first, she said, handing me my cortadito. But once it gets in your blood, you can't imagine living anywhere else. I moved here 5 years ago from Atlanta, felt completely lost for months. Her name was Kia, and somehow we ended up talking for 20 minutes about the challenges of starting over in a new place. She mentioned that the coffee shop sometimes hosted networking events for creative professionals, and would I be interested in coming to the next one? Walking home, I realized something had shifted. Instead of waiting for things to happen to me, I'd actually engaged with someone. I'd said yes to something new. It was a small step, but it felt significant. That networking event changed everything. Not in some dramatic lightning bolt way, but quietly, like seeds being planted. I met Sarah, a freelance graphic designer who was looking for someone to help with client relations and project management. I met Miguel, who ran social media for several local restaurants and mentioned they were always looking for good content creators. I met Elena, who worked for a nonprofit focused on supporting immigrant families and was passionate about storytelling that connected communities. For the first time since arriving in Miami, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. But here's what's fascinating. The more I focused on what I wanted to create rather than what I was trying to escape, the more opportunities seemed to appear. It wasn't magic exactly, but it felt close to it. When you're clear about what you're looking for, you start noticing things that were probably always there. Sarah offered me freelance work that first week. Miguel introduced me to a restaurant owner who needed help revamping their marketing approach. Elena and I discovered we had similar visions for using storytelling to build bridges between communities. Within a month, I had 3 steady freelance clients and the beginning of what felt like a real social circle. But more than that, I had something I'd been missing for years, a sense of purpose. My work wasn't just about paying bills, it was about helping small businesses tell their stories, connecting with their communities, building something meaningful. The synchronicities started becoming impossible to ignore. I'd be thinking about needing a particular skill for a project, and I'd meet someone at the grocery store who happened to have exactly that expertise. I'd be wondering about expanding into a new area of work, and a client would mention knowing someone who needed exactly what I was considering offering. My gratitude practice started organically. Every morning, sitting on my balcony with coffee, I'd mentally list 3 things I was grateful for from the previous day. Not big, dramatic things, but small moments that felt significant. The way the light hit the water when I walked by the bay. A text from a new friend. A client thanking me for work that felt like play. I started visualizing not just what I wanted, but how I wanted to feel. Confident in my abilities. Connected to my community. Financially stable but not driven by money. Creative and challenged and growing. I'd picture myself a year from now, living fully in Miami, roots deep, contributing something valuable. The affirmations came naturally too. Instead of the negative self-talk that had been my default for years, I'm too old to start over, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm never going to figure this out. I started catching those thoughts and replacing them with something more aligned with what I was creating. I'm exactly where I need to be. I trust my ability to build something beautiful here. The universe is listening to what I'm putting out there. 6 months in, I was walking past that same billboard that had stopped me in my tracks, and I realized the woman looking at it now was completely different from the one who'd first seen it. Not because my circumstances had changed, though they had dramatically, but because my relationship to my life had transformed. I wasn't just surviving Miami, I was thriving in it. I had steady work I loved, friends who felt like family, a sense of home I'd never experienced anywhere else. I'd found my rhythm in the city that had once felt so foreign, but the biggest shift was internal. I'd stopped waiting for life to happen to me and started actively creating my dream life. Every decision, from which coffee shop to visit to which projects to take on, came from a place of intention rather than fear or default. The law of attraction had become less about trying to control outcomes and more about aligning my energy with what I genuinely wanted. When you're clear about your intentions and willing to take action toward them, when you're grateful for what you have while staying open to what's coming, when you trust that you're capable of creating something beautiful, the world seems to respond in kind. My Phoenix friends asked how I'd done it so quickly, how I'd built a life in a new city in just 6 months. The practical answer was networking and hustle and being willing to say yes to opportunities. But the deeper answer was about vibrational alignment. When you stop focusing on what you don't want and start pouring your energy into what you do want, everything shifts. A year later, I signed a lease on a beautiful 1-bedroom apartment in Coconut Grove, walking distance from the water. I'd saved enough to feel secure, built a client base that felt sustainable, and developed friendships that made Miami feel like home in the deepest sense. But more than any of that, I'd learned something invaluable. Your thoughts create your reality, but only when you're willing to back them up with action, gratitude, and trust in the process. Standing on my new balcony, looking out at Biscayne Bay, I thought about that billboard that had changed everything. You create your own story. I'd spent so many years feeling like my story was happening to me, written by circumstances and other people's choices. Moving to Miami had taught me that I was both the author and the main character. That scared, uncertain woman who'd arrived with 3 suitcases and no plan. She was still part of my story, but she wasn't the ending. She was the beginning. The chapter where I learned that starting over isn't about erasing your past. It's about consciously creating what comes next. Miami had welcomed me not because I had everything figured out, but because I was willing to figure it out here, with this city as my partner in transformation. I'd learned to trust the process of building a life one intentional choice at a time. Now, when I see other newcomers looking lost or overwhelmed, I try to offer the same warmth that Kia had shown me that first day at the coffee shop. This city has taught me that we're all constantly creating our stories, and the most beautiful thing we can do is help each other write chapters worth reading. Every morning, I still sit with my coffee and practice gratitude for this life I've built. Every evening, I still visualize what I want to create next. Because I've learned that manifestation isn't about magic. It's about becoming so clear about what you want that you naturally start making choices that align with it. The universe brought me to Miami, but I chose to build a home here. And that choice, made new every single day, has created a story more beautiful than anything I could have imagined when I stepped off that plane with 3 suitcases and a heart full of hope. Signs from the universe are everywhere if you're paying attention. Sometimes they're as obvious as a billboard that stops you in your tracks. Sometimes they're as subtle as a barista's smile or a chance conversation that opens a door you didn't even know you were looking for. The key is staying open, staying grateful, and trusting that you have everything you need to create the life you're dreaming of. Your story is still being written, and you're holding the pen. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt like you were ready to create your own fresh start, comment below. I'm ready to write my story. Let me know what city or change is calling to your heart. And if you believe in the power of starting over, in the magic that happens when we align our intentions with our actions, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about real transformation. Share this with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to create something beautiful. Remember, you don't have to have it all figured out to begin. You just have to be willing to take the first step toward the life you're meant to live.